And welcome back.
How are you getting on, lads?
Good. I'm good.
Today we're joined by a very special man. Diarmuid, how about you introduce yourself?
My name is Diarmuid. I'm in West Kerry, from via Wexford. I live on a small little plot of land overlooking Fiontraw in West Kerry, and we were only here since April, but we got a good growing season in, and we're harvesting plenty. And my work tends to be a little more out of Kerry. It can be hard to get work down here in West Kerry, so I go up to different GA grounds around the country to do commentating jobs, and generally work with TG Cahir, who I suppose I have a fairly serious interest in the language and the possibilities and the potential of the language. And on the back of that, we founded Wild Irish Retreat down here 3 or 4 years ago to try and create the conditions in which the language can come to life in people again. And that's been working a treat.
Definitely. Wild Irish Retreats. Oh, go on, sorry?
I was about to say, there's been a big story in Kerry down this week now with fungi, right? A lot of people think he's dead.
He might be on retreat out in one of the islands, maybe. I don't know. Yeah, there's varying attitudes to it. I think down here, there's some people are very dependent on fungi for their way of life. For a lot of people, there's just a big connection with him, you know. Just from experience of being out, seeing a dolphin and interacting with a dolphin for many people the first time. So yeah, it's interesting to see how the national response to it and the different ideas people have, and the cynicism that they can take, or the positive reflections that they have as well. So yeah, we're at the center of some kind of a story this week. All right, there's some bit of respite in a way, in that it's no relation to COVID, and nobody has to be talking about that for 4 minutes in the day, which is great.
Yeah, as much as we try to avoid it, it normally comes up in conversation. The old COVID.
Yeah, for sure.
It's hard to ignore. It's the elephant in the room or in the world. But yeah, just going back on fungi there, it's really weird, our obsession with this dolphin. Obviously, I don't think it's the same dolphin. I don't think dolphins live that long. I think it just changed over time. That's a national secret.
That's the rumor. I don't know. Like, it's great when you actually. I've been picked up a couple of times hitchhiking by people who consider themselves friends of fungi. They go in the wintertime when the tourists don't come. They go out on small boats, and like, these people go out every day. I'm not talking about once a month. Like, these people go out every single day to hang out with him and make sure that he's in good form. So they know him very, very intimately. So that story is there, and it's a local trick by the cute whore West Kerry man to whatever dolphin is in the bay that he's passed off as fungi. But the ones closest to him would definitely tell you different.
No, our heart goes out to you, fungi, and sure, if you're listening to this, come back soon.
Yeah. Yeah, a national treasure, so he is. But yeah, you live a more traditional lifestyle, or traditional Irish lifestyle, than anyone else I've ever heard of. So, okay, you speak the best Irish I've ever heard. Like definitely, and then like your interest in TG Cahir's helping on that. But yeah, like even your Wild Irish Retreat thing. Like, just going out, talking Irish, doing these Irish traditions, just hanging out away from technology. It is really unique. How did you get into that kind of stuff?
I suppose I had to experience it for myself. I came down to the Gaeltacht when I was 21, because I was training to be a primary school teacher, and I came down with the same kind of blasé attitude towards the language as the majority of people would have, probably less than blasé, quite negative probably. And I thought it was, associated with a language in school, and it was something you had to learn, and I had difficulties with it and all of those things. But I realized when, after 3 days of just trying to speak it, I was playing hurling at Wexford at the time, and so I wasn't drinking and I wasn't partying with the rest of the lads, which can often be the way on those stints in the Gaeltacht.
Yeah.
And after about 3 days of trying to speak it, the language just came to life in me. There was some kind of splunk, like a spark, just something turned on, a switch that I never knew even existed. So I don't know how that sound is now, but my little man is downstairs. Maybe he's coming in the background.
Yeah, we can hear him.
It's fine. If you need to go,
Don't worry about it. We've had worse. We've had worse.
It's his lament for the Irish language, I think.
They're trying to teach him the Muckneelock right now.
Yeah, the general response. But yeah, once that came in, I pursued it and began teaching in an all-Irish school. And when I moved down here, then I suppose I realised that the richness of the language contained an awful lot of energy and wisdom and knowledge that if I hadn't ever have taken those steps to explore it, would never have come across. And they just seem to have been great allies to me. That source of energy and source of wisdom was a great ally. So it was just from the pure experience, I think, of seeing the benefits and joy that it brought to my life, and also how it rubbished the notion that I had and the way that I had learned the language similar to everybody else. 12 years in school of thinking that it was a chore or something that we were forced to do, or some romantic ideology, that actually was very practical, very real benefits that made my life, I suppose, align with a different type of movement, and it gave it a different inspiration.
I was going to ask you about your opinion on the curriculum to Irish in the school.
Yeah, definitely.
Because it's I don't like it. I don't think it's good. I think that they try to not even force it, but like it's too hard and unnecessary kind of stuff. Like
I think
I never learned a thing in there.
I think
write things down.
I think the one thing I would say is it is hard. The Irish language is not an easy language to learn. No. I've been doing a diploma for the last 2 years, and I thought once I kind of signed up for the diploma, by the end of it, I'd be kind of sorted. But I realised along the way that actually the way you have to think while speaking and while writing is there are things to be considered that are too deep for my intellect to be able to grab a hold of in a very short space of time, which is what conversation is. That said, I think if I asked the TUI now to go away and design a curriculum for me where after 12 years of speaking it and of learning it, that people wouldn't be able to articulate how they are beyond the general answer to the question, how are you? Conas Tatu, Tome Gama, like where people can't actually connect with their heart's answer to that question, how are you? It's a very serious question. How are you is not to be dismissed, you know. But if I was to ask you to go away, design something that ensured people wouldn't be able to do that, it'd be difficult. It'd be more difficult to design it to not be able to answer a basic question like that than it would to be able. And so the curriculum, the Irish curriculum, when you look at it, I mean, as a primary school teacher, the Irish, it blew me away how broad and how inclusive the curriculum was. But I think that the way that it's administered through the inspectorate and through guidelines and through paperwork and all of those things just drags the life out of it. And I think you need to take into consideration when you're doing something difficult, you know, you both do things in your own lives that at the start of them, you have a difficult road ahead. But when you know what the goal is, when you have an idea of what the value is that's waiting for you at the end, you penetrate through those difficulties with an awful lot of learning. I don't think they don't seem to be able to give context to the language and the benefit to our lives. They're very, very basic, very, very simple things that they just don't seem to be able to communicate because they're too focused on the Mochaneelach or too focused on poetry or whatever it is that people think the errors are. But they certainly, it was never articulated to me in any shape or form that I was ever cognizant of anyway, that this type of gold is in the language. type of goal that you find when you begin to meaningfully interact with it. So I think if you, yeah, to address that would be definitely one of the big one of the big things. But to understand that, I think you need to have lived through it for a while. So maybe that's a challenge as well.
Yeah, because
Yeah, definitely.
I would love to speak fluent Irish. Do you know what I
Mm.
mean? And
And you're not alone, Thomas. We meet, you know, we meet fucking hundreds of people. You start out on the Irish journey, like people come to you all the time. Oh, I'd love to be, I'd love to be, I'd love to be, I'd love to be. Fuck, you hear that so often, like, and it's. Imagine you'd love to be, and you don't. You're very limited, like, but it's like, and so many people are in the same boat.
But my thing with Irish is I only speak it when I'm abroad.
you know,
It's like
Yeah.
it's like this little hidden language. No one else is going to notice abroad. When you're getting harassed by people like people trying to sell you stuff, and you start speaking in Irish. Like I remember when I was in Greece, I had these two Greek ladies come up to me trying to sell me flowers, and I said, "Omul catagum dulgani letras," and they just walked right away.
Mm.
Now I said that out loud because there's Irish lads with me, and they laughed their ass off.
Yeah, yeah,
Um,
yeah.
but um, that
I'm not
means
sure.
can I get if
I'm not
anyone
sure
is not Irish?
I'm not sure what to do with that. The only thing that I feel when I'm abroad, or when I hear the language abroad, or listen to other people talking about their experience abroad, is a little bit of a sense of pride in the fact that we do
Yeah,
have our own language. And even if you're saying I'm Cadogan Bulgarian letters, at least it's there.
I'm better
You
Irish
know,
than that. But you know,
I
no,
do.
you don't. Don't lie. Come on now.
I went to an Irish primary school, but I actually had to leave it because I couldn't speak English as well as I should have been able to.
Okay.
And because we did maths to Irish, I was terrible at maths and I cast on. But I had to go to like a normal English speaking school for like
Mm.
sixth class, and then yeah.
And how is it
So
now?
how's it now? It's okay. It's not the best. Um, like I did higher level Irish. I got nearly 70%. But like even if you get 100%, or not maybe not 100, if you get something like 80 or 90% in the Irish exam, it really doesn't mean you're good at it. Like it means like sometimes it means you were able to memorize what the teacher told you,
Mm.
which is
Yeah.
what we learned. We learned here's an essay. Be ready to have this for every single one of these sharp pictures. Don't
Yeah.
have your own idea of what to say for these. Just have just know you have these sentences for these pictures, and we can memorize like an incredible amount.
Mm.
Now I kind of went off the cuff a little bit. And I still did pretty well, but
Yeah. And I mean, I think that it seems it's like I believe, I suppose, in a bilingual future to some degree, and I think that you can have the language of commerce, the language of business, you know, that's fine
yeah,
for that to be in English. But I think Irish is definitely more of a language of the heart, more of a way of articulating yourself, a deeper way of articulating yourself, and something that comes from, I suppose, deep in your DNA. The language is what it's in there in a very deep way. And I do wonder sometimes, like I think Irish men in particular are probably notorious for this, like, closed up, everything's grand type of a way of navigating the world. And I wonder if we spoke Irish, would Irish men be like that as much? Because I see the men down here in West Kerry, and the openness and the joviality they have with things like even talking about sex and stuff like that. They don't have the same, this like kind of shame, Naira shit feeling. Like they
yeah,
have this, they joke and they're open and they're expressive,
yeah.
and it makes everything light and loose, you know. So it's an idea. I may be way off of it, but
I kind
that's
of disagree with you, but not for bad reasons.
mm,
I think the reason you have people so open there is because they're open to learning. So they'd be more open people in general. People who are closed off saying, I don't want to learn Irish. Why would I learn Irish? They're not going to be open to anyone, really. Maybe they're close friends, but they're not going to be as
I
open
mean,
to the world.
I don't know who's not open to learning. Like there's like people at the city are open to learning. Everybody's open to learning in some way, I would have thought. But
But do you not think like some people don't want to hear it when it comes to the Irish language? Look, like I did my this 6th year, sick of Irish, never want to touch it again. You ever get that attitude?
yeah, for sure. I mean, it's the predominant attitude, but I think that's more to do with the experiences that they've had in the previous 12 years.
Yeah,
It's not necessarily anything to do with their character or with their outlook or falsiúnacht on life. Like it's just because of what their experience has been in the learning environment. But I definitely don't think that people down here are any more open. We are afforded the ability, I think, to be more open in our day-to-day lives because there isn't the same threat as is in the city. There isn't the same hunger and need to have your own and protect it and have as much as possible. That's maybe not quite as prevalent here because I think people here are definitely aware that we live in an abundant place on an abundant island, and so you don't need to have that tension that goes with sorting out your little crop or whatever. So I do think I find myself, for example, when I go to Dublin, I find myself looking at people and I see sometimes the strain of their day on their face as they pass me, and I'm not necessarily used to seeing it, and I want to go over and engage them and talk to them and hug them or do whatever it is that you feel would lighten whatever burden they're unnecessarily carrying. So I have to close myself down because I can't leave myself open to that level of kind of that energetic outlay to go and look around and start dealing with everybody. You have to kind of shut down and be about your business because you'd be too bare, you know. But there's always that adjustment when I get there first of remembering to kind of you have to lock things down a little bit here.
Pretty sure if you walked up to someone in Dublin and tried to hug them, you'd get knocked out.
Well, I don't think he meant literally go up and
No.
No, I did. I definitely did.
Maybe a cup of coffee first or something.
Yeah, probably. Yeah, if to start a bit slower and up in the capital, maybe.
Take them out to dinner first, you know.
Yeah, social distance hug or something at the moment. But yeah, Irish lads are pretty hidden in their emotions. Like I'm pretty safe to say I'm not really. I've talked to a lot of people who are really involved in mental health and have had pretty serious experiences, and it's opened me up a lot. But you know what, like the lad who's going through heartbreak and he says he's grand. I'm grand. That's the answer for everything to most lads if something bad is going on.
I think it's certainly less common in our generation. I think maybe sometimes older people look at us and say, hang on there, you're letting go far too much. And there is that constant like generational divide in that. I think like the vast majority of young men who I know are far more, have a far greater capability, I think, of discerning what's going on and letting go of it, or finding groups of men where they can actually share outside of getting drunk and having a cry at 2 o'clock in the morning or whatever it is. They've worked that out, that it's quite. We all we have to do is look at the statistics and say, look at young men are in a danger when they pursue life through that keep it closed mentality. And so I think we've all been forced to open up because of it a little bit at least. So you can see that all over the place. I mean, it's much more common now.
Yeah, well, thank God for that. Like, you don't want a bunch of people who just can't bear talking about how they feel. That's not healthy at all. I'm glad in the last few years Ireland's been kind of hammering down on mental health, making sure we sort ourselves out.
And I think you can't have people like maybe the experience often is in America, where they tell you their whole life story and every issue in it 2 minutes after meeting you. Like, I think there's definitely a happy medium. I mean, there's things you have to go through yourself, and there's things you have to learn, and it's important that you don't share them, I think, because as soon as you share it, it maybe doesn't have a chance to integrate itself in you. Like there are you don't share your pearls with pigs all the time. Like, you do have to hold on and hold stuff close to you and let it work its way through you. But certainly to be McCon, to be honest when somebody asks you the question, and don't let them go till you've finished your answer, because they've asked you now, how are you, has to be a sincere question. Like, and that's how I'd feel with definitely the majority of the fellas who I'd be chatting to down here on the phone, whatever it is. Like, the first serious question you'd ask would be, how are you? And you'd be answering straight, like, you'd be answering straight because you know that they want to know, and you know that it's a great benefit to you to articulate it out loud, so you can hear it back to yourself, almost say, okay, yeah, but that's resolved, or that needs more work.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I get that. Um, I love the direction it's going in. I love it so far. But just going back on what you do when you have these retreats, a big
Mm,
part of it that I've seen is foraging, and I feel like that's an art that's been, I do call it an art that's been lost on a lot of people. Like everyone sees blackberries. I don't think most people pick them when they see them, but they think they're cool.
mm,
But you go out and you pick a lot more stuff than just blackberries. I see out there you're collecting seaweed. Don't know what seaweed
mm.
tastes like, but yeah, foraging in Ireland, there's not really a big community for it compared to other places. But what's your experience with foraging?
Um, I had to go through, and I think it's why you would arrive at that kind of a summation that it's maybe not done, for example, as much as Eastern Europe and places where it's much more
Or even the
common.
UK?
Or the UK. I mean, the UK, I think, is very open in terms of your ability to just to walk on country paths and through fields and stuff like that. There's a great protection for a walker in England that we don't have here. We're much more into private property and all of that stuff. But I would say the first thing that I had to deal with, which is definitely a legacy issue, is around shame. I think if you were in Ireland in the mid 1700s or in the mid 1800s to be foraging, as we would call it now, but to be grabbing food from the wild, was a source of shame. Similar enough to the language, actually, was a source of shame to be seen, to be spoken, the poor man's language, and to be out collecting wild food is poor man's behaviour. And I felt it. I don't think I feel it so often anymore, but I would feel when I'm in the hedges, like, and I've a full pile of something on my back, and I'm picking away at something, and a car comes. There is this feeling still washes over sometimes, or has done in the past, where I'm like,
Same.
this is am I bad? Like, am I wrong? Is this to be, is it, there's something shameful going on inside of me? And I track the feeling and see, okay, that's what that is, that's fine, and off you go and you continue about your day. But to succumb to that would be very, very easy as well, and to not enjoy the experience then. So the first thing was to deal with the shame of being out collecting. The second thing is I was very lucky in the woman that I met, because she was a keen forager and had an awful lot of information that I wouldn't have had. And so every time we went out, I learned a new plant, a new medicine, a new herb, a new place, a new time, a new weather pattern. There was just always something new to learn. So I was very lucky with that as well. And then just the notion, I suppose, one of the things that I came down to West Kerry for was to create enough space in my life that I could see who was inside of me other than the socially constructed version of myself that I was. And reading stuff like Robert Bly, Iron John, these kind of books, they talked a lot about the wild man. And I didn't know who the wild man in me was, because I was quite a well-cultivated social character who played hurling and did all those things. So I had to come to a wild place to find a wild man, and the wild man needed sustenance, and the wild man gets his sustenance from wild food. You don't get your sustenance from pesticide-ridden, water pumped up, perfectly
Yeah,
shaped vegetables in super value. You get the full cohort. You have to knock, you might have to knock flies off your food, and to be fine with that, and to know that whatever's on it isn't going to poison you, or isn't to be something to be afraid of, because there
yeah,
isn't flies in your plate at home, And sometimes you'd even leave them and say, well, look, at you got there first, Mr. Spider, you can have that blackberry, I'm going to move on to the next one. But that's the
yeah,
kind of interaction that you're having, To be down at the seaside foraging seaweed, I mean, the benefits of seaweed are endless in any case, but also just to be out in rough terrain, off the track, climbing on rocks, falling down, your feet wedged in between rocks, going into the sea, taking your shoes off. It's just, we spend an awful lot of time talking about mental health. Like, I mean, I don't know, I'm a little bit jaded of the phrase, to be honest, because out there, like, that's just, there's just such medicine out there for every aspect of yourself. It's nothing to do with your mental health, because your microbiome is your mental health, your feet are your mental health, everything is your mental health when you go out into it.
Yeah.
But we don't go out into it very often, I would say. And I certainly didn't. I mean, maybe other people do all the time. I don't know. It doesn't seem to me like they do. And I certainly didn't before I came down here. So foraging, there's many, many different levels to it. And all of which, as far as I've experienced so far, even and probably particularly in bringing up something like historical shame, to be able to deal with that so I don't pass it on to my son, or so I don't pass it
Yeah.
on to the next generation. It's just been beneficial at every single turn. And I love now we've got stuff down, picked from if it's yarrow or whatever it is, we have it infused in oils now, and we'll have that throughout the winter.
Yeah.
And that sits as a decorative piece of medicine in our kitchen as well. So yeah, it's definitely something that I just wish more people would do it. I don't know why. I just think maybe they just like the
I think get
language.
Thomas into it, but COVID kind of got in the way.
Yeah, well, there's
Oh,
time.
shame. No, listen.
Yeah, it's not going to be here for much longer, so we don't need to worry
Yeah.
about that too much.
So
Because I've known nothing
for
about foraging, I'll be honest with you. And Jared, I remember before COVID, Jared was going out every other weekend, and he'd send us pictures of stuff he foraged. Like it was cool to look at, you know.
yeah,
What do
nothing to
you
get into.
what do you look for? What's your experience with
Sweet and garlicky stuff.
it?
So any kind of berry. And I love picking berry garlic because
Yeah.
who doesn't like garlic? But you can saute the leaves. It's all right. And was it near where we are? There's like loads of gorse, and like the flowers often smell like coconut.
Yeah. A
So
kind of
just
peach coconut, yeah.
yeah, like I went out and I tried loads of things. So I was like, okay, I may as well know what they taste like. And I did up the dandelion root to be like a coffee. Not a
Nice.
fan.
Yeah.
Leaves, not really a fan. Stem, not really a fan. Moving on to thistle root, not a fan. All these things are very bitter, but the plants don't want you to eat them. Who would have figured? But at the moment, blackberry and garlic, if I like them, so I'll take them. What about you? And nettle flowers.
Yeah, for at the moment, one of probably the best things that we would do is we would go out in the morning and get probably a mixture of about 7 different greens that are still available, and then mix them with some wheatgrass that have grown, and then add something like a banana or a couple of oranges or something like that for a juice in the morning. So the nettle leaves are fresh again at this time of year. Sour sorrel. The blackberry on the sciac of the blackberry, you have the leaves, the young fresh leaves. We collect those. The dandelion leaves. When you put them into something and alter the flavor a little bit, I mean, it's perfect. Or if you're just adding them to salads with other, with olive oil and things like that make it more palatable. I mean, I'm certainly not going down the side of the road with my head in the ditch, eating everything straight out of it. Like you're adding it and mixing it in with different things.
I don't think people really realize what you're doing. Like, I'm not going out there eating the sticks off a tree, like.
No, but you do that anyway. Like.
Yeah, no thanks. Fiber, Thomas, it's good for you.
Oh, sure.
But yeah. So, what would be your favorite wild edible?
Definitely up to now, seaweed. I'm trying to broaden my knowledge on mushrooms at the moment and
I think that's dodgy. You could die. So
I don't even do foraging. I know there's a lot of poisonous mushrooms, like just hanging around the place.
They certainly are. But I mean, I suppose what I did with the seaweed was I found 5 or 6 that I could identify and was very certain of, and I knew that I liked. And I feel with mushrooms maybe a little bit the same. Even if I don't collect everything that I go out and get or that I bring back, once I identify it, if there's anything I'm uncertain of and I put it up online and I see if there's an identification or not, I think that just, again, to be out there doing it is as good as anything you get from the food itself.
Yeah.
But also, I think that, you're running a gauntlet with mushrooms and it's not to be trifled with. But there's enough of them there that are clean enough. Once you get to know them,
Yeah, like
that you can
Chicken
depend
of the
on
Woods.
it.
People love that one. Have you
Puffball
ever
is
tried
very
that
common
one?
around here. Don't think so. Don't think so. We got a brain what's it called? A brain fungus, I think is. I don't know the official term for it, but it's just like cauliflower-sized
Yeah,
brain-looking mushroom from Clarny National Park last year, and brought it back and dried it and just added it to things as we went. So you bring the little booklets. You get little pocket-sized booklets. Bring those, and you just. It's curiosity as much as anything else. You're satisfying your curiosity. You're getting to know things. You're looking at patterns. You're looking at the trees. You're looking at
yeah.
small details that otherwise you wouldn't be doing. So I think it's to be sampled. Um, I have a friend who say I was asking about. I wanted to identify a mushroom one day, and he said, "Look, just put it in your mouth and track your instant reaction to it, and your body will tell you if you can listen finely enough. Your body will tell you if that's good or not." I mean, kamikaze attitude to mushrooms in some respects, but I also there's something kind of idealistic
Tastes like
about
dead
it.
cap.
Yeah, I leave that one there. And can your body do that? Do we have that ability? I mean, animals have that ability. I imagine it's something that we have too, but we don't use
Yeah.
it very often because we wait to be certain in the more scientific side of it.
Yeah, that's one thing that has me a bit confused. Like, what are we actually supposed to eat? Like, you go out there and nearly every kind of animal is edible, but nearly every kind of plant will kill you. But
Mm.
realistically, we should probably eat more plants. Um, so it's a weird one. Yeah, but have you made the mistake of excited of raw elderberries?
Not yet. And I don't think I
You're,
will now.
you're
What
lucky,
happened
man.
to you?
No, they're fucking toxic when they're eaten raw.
Okay.
And there it was like, they look beautiful. I had them on the thing, and I was like little grapes. And a
Mm.
while later, I was like, I should not have done that.
Christopher McCandless style. You're like, I didn't read the right. Yeah, you
No,
know.
I read the first bit of the Wikipedia, not the whole thing.
Mm.
You know,
Yeah.
I
that
didn't know
was a
the thing
mistake.
with is which part of the rhubarb you're not supposed to eat? Is the
The
leaves?
leaves.
Leap.
See, I didn't know that when I made
Mm.
a rhubarb crumble, right? And I was there
Delicate.
serving it to my family, and they said, "Oh, it looks lovely." I went, what? Like, how'd you do it? I was like, "I just put the whole thing up, good, including the
Well,
leaves." Like,
it's
well,
it's
yeah.
great, Thomas. We need pioneers to go the wrong way, so the rest of us,
Yeah,
not to eat the
yeah.
leaves of rhubarb.
But yeah, the whole thing was thrown out, and I ruined Christmas.
How Thomas ruined Christmas. But yeah, definitely a wild lifestyle is a fun one. But the thing in Ireland, I think you'd agree, is a lot of it isn't allowed. You know, like wild camping is illegal here. So
Mm.
that's kind of rough. You know,
Well,
I think hunting should
yeah.
be a right of people here, but
Mm.
depending on the species, especially bow hunting, because I
Mm.
think any fool can kill something with a gun, but with a bow, among successful hunters, their success rate per animal is 10%.
Mm.
So if you're going to do it, make it hard.
Mm. Yeah.
And you have to learn the skill. It takes a lot of time. Uh, I don't know. I have some strong feelings in that one because I do archery.
Yeah. I mean, I suppose it depends on your definition of allowed. Like, if you're waiting for the government to tell you what you can and can't do, then that's fine. You'll have to pursue allowedness in a certain way. If you're tuned into what your body needs and what your environment, your biosphere, the world around you needs, you live a very different style of life.
Mm.
Um, in the city, obviously, that's maybe more difficult to do, and in the country, that's much easier to do. So I think if you're, and I think we're probably going to come to that point very, very soon. Like there's already the early stages of it in places like Wales with, if you can produce a certain amount of your own energy, and if it's living in I suppose Kohahu, if you're living in community with the piece of land that you're on, you can build your own house free of planning or free of the restrictions of planning. So I think when we start making our laws and start making our decisions in our own lives based on what's good for both us, our immediate community, and the animals, plants, and general biosphere around us, then that's the law. That's the law
Yeah.
of nature, and that's a law that's worthy of listening to. And I think maybe the laws that go against that are laws worthy of ignoring. And that you run the gauntlet then, obviously. You run the gauntlet of being imprisoned, or you run the gauntlet of fines, like you run the gauntlet of dealing with your society then. But it's up to every man to make that decision for himself, and for every woman to make that for herself. But I think it's a worthy one to sit down with, because far too often, far too many people choose the law of the
Yeah.
land and decide the law of air, the law of the government is what matters. But I probably would disagree with that.
We had a comedian on yesterday and just kind of talking about him. We were talking about how society is very childish now, and how you're not meant, like, everything's PC, so that you can't everyone's protected, no one's like will have to make decisions for themselves, everything like that. And I find that very related to the you're not allowed to build on your own property without asking the government. Do you know what I mean? Like,
Mm.
I don't know
Like,
what you.
how ridiculous is that? Like, the amount of personal freedoms we have here is very small. Everything's regulated. It's a rough one.
Mm.
Like what Jonesy said yesterday. Chris Jones, great guy.
Mm.
Our governments kind of treat us like children,
Yeah.
well into our adulthood. Um,
Well, when he brought
it's a
up the
bit crazy.
seatbelt thing, right? Like, it's a
Okay,
law
well,
to wear your seatbelt. Well, it's a good law now, and it's good advice. But surely, with God, you've seen enough people die in accidents that you should just know to wear your seatbelt.
yeah,
Mm.
or in the bottom of a pool, like he said, it says don't dive in for like a kiddie's pool.
Mm.
Like obviously that shouldn't be there, but yeah, and that's why I like the States. For some things, they got a lot of personal freedom. They can kind of do whatever they want. If you have a bit of land, do what you want.
Mm.
Here, it's pretty difficult. Like
Yeah.
even like keeping chickens is a bit of a hassle.
Yeah, I suppose it depends where it's going, and it's quite clear we can see from where it's going. Is I think in the early stages of, or maybe mid stages of ecological collapse, that the direction we're going in listening and being treated like children like that. I mean, anyway, look at if you think about that for a second, if you've got a significant amount of adult people acting, behaving, and expecting and looking to be treated like children, you're not going to end up in a very adult place that serves us all relatively well.
Yeah,
So there's very interesting stuff on, again, some of the research and some of the stuff written on masculinity and the different stages that we get to. We do find ourselves often very much trapped in a boyish sense of ourselves, and there's an unwillingness to, based on maybe traumas or based on undigested parts of ourselves, we secretly look to daddy to provide for us and to provide the boundaries throughout our lives. And if we stay in that place, I think we then the suggestibility of government, as we're seeing at the moment more clearly than ever, is something that's looked for, as opposed to in some shape or form resisted if it's not what serves everybody to live vibrantly.
yeah,
So yeah, I think we're going to have to move beyond that. I think the first step to moving beyond that is to deal with whatever fear is being drummed up inside of us by governments working on behalf of the corporate ideology, which is if we're kept in fear, like you can sell stuff to us and you can manipulate and control us. I mean, it's very, very basic. And until you address that underlying fear inside of yourself, you're going to be suggestible and you're going to be manipulated, and you're going to have a life that you feel like you're a victim and all this stuff is happening to me, and why is it happening to me, and if I was this
yeah,
it'd be better, and if I was that it'd be better, if I had that I'd be better. And all of those things die on that rock once you address it and sit down with it.
yeah,
Not an easy thing to do, because it leads into maybe dark places that you've been avoiding for a long time. It's not to be trifled with, and I'm not saying that it's an easy thing to do, but it certainly feels like it has to be done, maybe more so now than ever.
yeah. Yeah, even with regard to self-sufficiency in Ireland, the laws around it are very like not in favor of the person. But yeah, grow all your own plants. You want to keep any kind of livestock? Good luck to you.
Mm.
You want to fish? Okay, well you can catch a certain amount of these, certain amount of these, certain amount of these. Uh, okay, cool. But like even with that, the level, like the amount you can fish is pretty low.
Mm.
I'm sure you're pretty well versed in that. Um, and yeah,
Yeah,
even
yeah,
rain collection here.
it's surprised, yeah. And I mean, even though maybe it's in different parts of America, there's aspects of freedoms that we don't have here, but it's certainly like I think that there are laws in plenty of states that severely restrict, hamper, limit, and maybe even make it totally illegal to grow in your own front garden or to grow in your own back garden. So I don't know if that's what's down the road for us. I'd imagine something serious will happen in between. But at the moment, the government seem to be doing the bidding of forces that want to ensure that we are as dependent on either the government or the
Yeah,
corporate classes for our sustainability as people. And until that changes, we're going to get what we're signing up for it, and then we complain about it. But I mean, it's what we're looking for, you know.
yeah. Everyone wants a bit of security, but you know that kind of takes away, or it normally takes away a bit of freedom.
Mm.
Um, what's
Yeah, I
that
mean,
quote? Someone who gives up freedom for security deserves neither.
lovely. Yeah, I mean, I think there's from what I can understand, and it makes sense in my own journey anyway. There are three stages that we pass into. The first in our earlier years, maybe up until we're 7 or 8, and we're dependent, and dependence is the first stage, and then we realize and establish and find a degree of independence, and we live that for maybe 10 or 12 years. Some people live it for 50 or 60 years. Some will live it for much less. And the goal, the natural progression is into interdependence. That's why I don't want to become self-sustainable. I want to be interdependent. I want to depend on my neighbor. I want him to depend on me. I want us to feel the benefits of being dependent on each other. And so that interdependence is the crucial next step. At the moment, we're still in this notion of independence. We all have to have our own laptop. We all have to have our own car. We all have to have our own. We all have to have our own of everything to make sure that our little secure bubble is safe and perfect and certain, and we know what's coming around the corner and we're able to deal with it. And it's actually an opening up into uncertainty, and the uncertainty of interdependence is very, very real, and not always easy to deal with. But until we open up into that interdependence and that notion of interdependence in ourselves, yeah, we will remain locked in a kind of independent, dependent stage, which is the childishness that you're talking about, that childish outlook and treatment of us
Yeah,
as being childish, because we're not graduating to that third stage.
yeah.
Mm.
What a world we live in.
And
Um,
full of the beauties as well. God,
yeah,
that's certainly what happens sometimes when you look at these things. It gets a bit morose and negative, and I can feel my body gets kind of down a little bit, and
yeah.
but like the sun is coming in over Eagle Mountain beside me here, and I have to remember that my boy is downstairs and he's in great form, despite a bit of a sickness. So
As
there's
long as he's
obviously
okay.
amazing stuff happening all the time as well.
Yeah. Um, we've talked to a couple of proud fathers in this podcast before.
Mm.
You know, obviously we haven't experienced it ourselves, but the happiness we see in some lads' hearts when they get to talk about their kids, or like the kid like comes into the room when they're doing a podcast or something. Like it is just heartwarming.
It's wholesome.
It's
Very
It's
so
wholesome.
amazing.
wholesome.
It's
Yeah,
great to see.
yeah.
It's amazing how long you spend as a young fella in your 20s trying to avoid it, and then when it
Yeah,
finally catches up with you, it's actually probably one of the great journeys you go on in your life.
yeah.
Yeah.
Must be so weird though. It sounds crazy to me. But
Mm.
yeah. One thing I love to see is dad's doing a good job. I'm very fortunate. My daddy's a great guy. But I know I've known people dads haven't been there. It does affect them. It's rough. I feel terrible for people who don't have a connection with their dad, or
Mm.
their dad's just not a good guy.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, you see in the experience of it, definitely a lot crystallizes, and you begin to understand how difficult that is and how easy it is for somebody to slip out of the the natural flow of things. So I find much more maybe empathy towards those men who maybe have struggled in that relationship. And all you'd be thinking really, as you're speaking there, Jared, is all you're thinking is, I hope you just hope against all hope that the decisions you're making are the right decisions and that you're doing a good job, and
Yeah.
anybody's view of that from the outside, even though people are very quick to offer you their view from the outside, it's kind of irrelevant. It's between you and the boy, and you have to really, there's a lot of trust in it, but it's beautiful.
Yeah, no,
Yeah.
it is beautiful.
Mm.
But going back to beauty again, so Ireland isn't as wild as it once was. The world isn't as wild as it once was. But definitely with your wild retreats, you kind of get a glimpse of what it used to be like, so on. So for anyone who doesn't know, could you give us a rundown of what actually happens during these retreats?
Yeah, I mean, people generally make big journeys to come down, so the Friday night tends to be about them landing in. I do a yoga nidra practice, which is a 2 or 3 hour value of sleep in a 20-minute kind of body relaxation visualization technique, and that's designed specifically to bring them down into the place that they are and into their bodies and into the environment they're in, and then to also address the break that's there with the language and the healing that's required to put that in front of them in a way. The Saturday is just helter skelter, full belt, all day outside, out in the elements. We play, depends on the tides, because we have seaweed foraging and we play hurling on the beach and we need space on the beach. So it depends on the tides. We'll move things around. But we start with a yoga and a meditation at 7:30 in the morning. A breakfast, as much foraged foods as possible, or else organic. Pretty much everything. And then it's down to the beach to play hurling. We do wild food foraging of seaweed and a wild food foraging walk with medicines, and we'll bring it back up to the hostel and make the different salves or creams or ointments or whatever it is we're doing on the particular retreat. And then we'll have a bit of lunch outside, maybe after the seaweed foraging, and then we go back up and begin to prepare for the sweat lodge. Sweat lodge is an old, it's most primarily, I think, a native Indian practice, but there are certainly records of being done here in different guises and maybe for different reasons. The native Indians, I don't know, or the Native Americans, but for us anyway, it's a ritual, a straight up ritual, and we don't kind of hide the fact, I suppose, as well. It's a cleansing and a purification ritual where we build a Sally Bender with a hole in the middle of it. We have a fire just outside with hot rocks. We burn the fire for 2 or 3 hours, put hot rocks, well, they start off cold, but we put rocks into the fire, and then we do 2 to 3 rounds where the 20 or however many are on the retreat will sit in the enclosed Sally Bender with blankets and tarps and everything we can enclose it with, so there's as much heat as possible trapped inside. And then we all sit, and what happens next, I mean, depends on each one. There'll be singing, there'll be sharing, talking, meditation, whatever it is, and it's just a purification kind of a ritual. Sunday morning, similar again, start off with a guided meditation, yoga, breakfast, and then maybe it might be the wild food foraging walk on that day. It depends on the breakup. And then we'll do a closing circle up on the cliff overlooking County Shabale, at the tip of just on the on Slayhead Drive, close to where the hostel is. So it's out in it, like you're out in it all the time, and it's fantastic to see people who aren't out in it all the time come down, and they come down with the fear and trepidation with the language and with having to be out in it. But once they break through the discomfort that they have in both speaking the language, because the language is, I mean, we'll do a couple of Kjerkel Choras and stuff like that, but really it's just about, look at whatever you have invite whatever's down deep in you to come out and struggle through till you get to that point. And that's generally what people do. They'll feel discomfort with things, they won't be happy about things, but we just encourage them as best they can at any time where a difficulty arises to observe the difficulty as opposed to be the difficulty. And once they kind of observe it, they realize it's attached to something that they need to deal with anyway, and they break through some form of blockage that they've had that's pertinent to them in their lives, because they've gone on a journey to come down to us. Like, they've gone on an imram, they're looking for a healing of some sort, and so generally it comes up because that's what, when you commit to your healing journey, what the medicine you need comes up, you know. So that's generally what happens. The feedback is, I suppose, one of the things that I was looking for initially was that there was a potential to get in touch with a source of energy, a physical energy, not anything mental or spiritual or anything else, just a source of physical energy that would assist them live their lives more fully. That the language would unlock, that the food would unlock, the experience would unlock, whatever it was. I didn't mind what unlocked it, but as long as it unlocked it. And the overwhelming feedback is definitely of that. It's unlocked something for people, and that's really kind of what it's about. It's not about the language, or it's not about foraging. It's about engaging with all of those things for more of you to come to the surface, that then is accessible to you to do things you want to do with your life, which require great energy, you know.
Just with regard to what you're saying, just hopping way back for a second. Without
we play hurling too. How could I leave that out? We play hurling on the beach. Wild hurling. How could I leave that one out? That's the other thing we do. Yeah.
I think you said at the start.
Oh, okay.
So when you're getting your break, you know, like, everyone's going out and they're foraging for what they can find. But if there's not much, like, you're doing the organic stuff, do you like just go with native things, like things that are native to Ireland? Like, you wouldn't be adding in spuds or anything, or what do you do?
We've gotten the first couple of years we got our veg from the lads in My Hill. There's a grower locally, Sophie Seal, who has a market garden. We grow quite a bit ourselves. Some of the lads brought food this time who were on the retreat. That was all used. I mean, we might have, like, you know, when you're cooking for 25 people, you've got maybe a dal or a curry or something like that that's not native Irish, native Irish fare, but we go with kind of what's on offer, what comes to us, and then we go down to Irish Whole Foods just before it. They do a sell-off of produce on a Saturday morning where you get organic lentils, oats, dry stock, rice, all of that stuff, and you get it for 25-50% off. Flours, we bake our own bread for it, all of that kind of stuff. So
it's all vegetarian?
It's all vegetarian, yeah. It's all vegetarian. Okay. I mean, if we could source, I would have no issue. Like, if there's a cull in Killarney and we can get some deer. I mean, I had a cull here a few days ago myself of 6 chickens, cockerels, young cockerels that needed to be. There was no home for them, so we killed them and plucked them, and just.
It's a tough job, but
it's tough but enjoyable, and so I wouldn't be of the vegetarian mindset necessarily, but you'd see that you wouldn't want to be supporting the meat industry as it stands. I mean, that doesn't make as much sense.
I get you. I think in all the world, I think we're one of the better ones, in all fairness. Compared to the United States or China, we have a vastly better one, especially compared to Brazil.
Doesn't the United States, like, spray all their chicken in, is it chlorine, I believe? What's the science behind that?
I don't know. They're crazy.
I don't know what it is, but
don't agree with their food. Ours is a bit nicer, or we're not nicer to our cows, and so on. But I understand your perspective. But just going back to the last part of your answer before, you said you normally get, like, an overwhelmingly good response from people.
Yeah.
But I'm assuming there might have been at least 1 or 2 negatives. And have there been any? You don't need to go into specifics, like.
Well, I mean, the general feedback has been like we're encouraging every time we look for feedback in, okay, what can we do better?
Yeah.
Some of the things that have come up there have been around like the notion of ignite and sustain. I mean, you've ignited something, but now can we sustain it? Should we have a monthly Zoom call? Should you send us packs with foraging tips and techniques or whatever? And they're all there. That's definitely somewhere we could develop. The issues that people have had, I think, have fallen thankfully under the bracket of personal learnings. There's been a couple of people
That's what I was thinking, yeah.
Who have been like, you know, they might be 65 playing hurling for the first time ever, climbing down on rocks, climbing down cliff faces, walking them along to get seaweed, slippy rocks, stuff like that. And they register their discomfort most certainly with us, but they have done the twice that it's happened, they've done it as we would have dreamed that they would, which is, it brought up this in me and I saw this. So
yeah.
If they have had it, they've held it back, and maybe they have in the aftermath when they come back to reality and they feel maybe there was a gap between the perfect world we created for them in a weekend versus the reality of day-to-day life. I don't know, but so far it's been, there's nothing that stands out, Jared, to be honest, thankfully.
Yeah, okay, that's good.
It's good to hear.
No, I was hoping for like one crazy story, but
I mean, I did lock a woman in the hostel one time. Oh
Lord.
I drove I had to go up in the van. I think it was on the first or the second one, and I had to go up in the van. And the Saturday night with the sweat lodge, I'm just full belt because you're preparing food for down there afterwards, and I'm sorting the fire out. And I've built and I've done everything. You know, there's a core of us who've done everything ourselves. So it's all go. And the third round of the sweat lodge was going on, and I had that time to go up in the van and get the food to bring back down. And I was driving up the road in the pitch black, obviously with the lights on, but all of a sudden I heard this voice in the van in the back, and there was a woman who had just maybe gotten tired and had come up and sat in the van. And so now I was bringing her back up to the hostel, and I said, look, I have to go up. You're welcome to come back down with me. And she said, no, look, I'm tired. I'm going to go to bed. So I said, that's fine, and brought her up and brought the food back down. And then when we got back later that night, she had obviously woken up in the hostel and was the only one there. We were all down having food at the sweat lodge, and she was completely disorientated and registered her anger with me on that one. But I felt she'd chosen it, so I didn't entertain it for too long. Like,
well, like she told you she was just going to stay back, but then give out to you.
Yeah.
Okay, well,
you dick. No, I'm messing.
I don't know what the crack was there, but
yeah, well, I mean, you know yourself when you start dealing with the general public with stuff like this, you can get some interesting.
Yeah,
it's so different. Like you get such interesting stuff back to you.
If you're dealing with a bunch of people, it's bound to happen, especially with the circumstances you're putting them through. It's very unique to them, very new to them. So shit can happen.
You see it on the Friday all the time. This reticence, like the language brings up a lot of fear for people, and once they're in that position of fear, they become a little bit needy and grabby, and a little bit like maybe abrasive, or like it's very, very subtle. I mean, the people who come on the retreat are bloody beautiful all the time, but you can sense their tension, and it's around the discomfort of the situation. But of course, we're welcoming down their tension because we know that's the first step. So you're not battling it, you're not entertaining it, really. You're just kind of allowing it to be, and then bring them down slowly, and then you have them with you, and once they're with you, it's gold from there, you know.
Yeah. And just our final parting question. So Ireland is extremely deforested. We talked about this before we started recording. It's one of the most deforested countries in Europe. So, like, what do you think we can do to try to get Ireland wild again? I know, like, there's grants for people to try and get forestry going, but after 15 years, it's worth nothing, and the place just gets cut down. Like, what can we do to even get the government involved in making more national parks, getting the place back?
I mean, there's so much in that, because the setup at the moment, because we take much of our commands from Europe, and because things are maybe on what is a local level brought out to a European level. So you grow this, and you have Sitka spruce, and you have cows, and you'll grow barley, and we section stuff off, and then wherever those things are grown, you've got a cash crop in that area, and so the land is becomes more valuable for that thing, and then local people who are trying to maybe just grow a few spuds and onions or whatever it is, and have a little bit of a holding for themselves, that becomes out of their reach in a way, because it can be hard to make money against the people who just want a carbon sink, for example, down in West Kerry, so they can spray 2 kilograms more of pesticide in their land in Carlow. So the whole imbalance in the forestry industry at the moment, and the ridiculous grants that are available, okay, they're making what I would call tacit efforts to reforest with natives and stuff like that. Really, we're looking at the Sitkas, our cash crop, and there's great grants available for it. No real use for the trees, but there's great grants for it, other than what's exported probably.
Yeah.
So, like, when you get into that level of, like, the entire capitalist structure and how it plays itself out on our little island on the frontier of the western frontier of Europe, is very hard to say. It's above my abilities, I suppose, to be able to articulate what's required. I definitely think, on a personal level, if you can make some kind of connection with the notion of what a tree is, what a yew tree is, what an oak tree is, what an ash tree is, what benefits they have given us down through the centuries, what benefits, or the feelings that you can have around them, to be out with them, in them, climbing them, on them, that type of a relationship with them, you're maybe much more likely to take up its case then. Like I would argue, and I have done in the past within in GA circles, that surely in the time of the ash dieback disease, there's no group of people more important to take on the case of the ash tree than herders. I mean, it's given them
Yeah.
their game for
Yeah.
giving them
Right.
their ability to articulate themselves for hundreds and hundreds of years. So surely when the ash is suffering, we would take up that case on behalf of the ash tree. Is that possible, or are we going to stay in our, we have to win this game and we have to just train here?
They could do it.
They definitely could. So I think when the vested interests of society, of people and organizations and communities, when they get together with a shared vision of what they want their area to be and what they want in their area, not maybe to have 20 acres of what looks like Chernobyl after a Sitka spruce plantation is cut down. I mean, it's
That's happening to our local forest.
but it's happening
It looks
everywhere,
terrible.
It's happening everywhere. I mean, it's happening everywhere, and we still continue to do it and still plant more. And individuals do it. Okay, they're in that. I have to protect and have to have my earnings. And as understandable as it is, it poses a serious difficulty for us going forward in trying to reforest our country. So yeah, like, it's on so many levels. Like, you look at the roads, you look at what's pulled down, you look at the times of the year, you look at the burning off. You look, just so many of our practices are geared towards, I think, a more scientific, practical. This is what we need to do. This is when we need to do it. These are the rules and the laws, and this is what Europe needs, and this is what the government says we need, and all of those things. It's like, I suppose you'd always be lobbying and hope that the government will do a turn on these things, and there's tentative steps for sure.
It's too late
But
to start. I should. They say the best time to plant the tree was 20 years ago, but the second best time is today.
yeah. I mean, Quilta.
Yeah.
I come across people who work for Quilta arguing or putting forward the facts online of the amount of natives that they're planting at the moment, or the amount of groweries that they're funding who are growing oak trees or growing ash or whatever. But a little bit like a lot of things that the government come out with. There definitely seem to be more in the optics, and it's like, oh, we can show you this, but behind the scenes, like this is where, well, what's in your area. Like, look around at what's in your area. Look how many wild places are in your area. Look what's happening. Look what kind of trees are being planted. Like, we're not dumb. Like, we see what's going on around
Yeah.
us. And
Um,
that anecdotal evidence is enough for us. So it's multi-layered, but I think it starts for each of us. It starts with making some form of an actual connection with trees in some meaningful way. But that's a bit pie in the sky, maybe a bit hippie-ish, and it's not enough, or it's not what people want. But I don't know what else you can do sometimes when everything else seems to be going one way. You just have to be bold and go the other way and see what happens.
Definitely. Yeah, I agree with not basically everything you just said. Yeah. I know from my own experience, I think outdoor sports is a great thing for us. I've been doing a 3D bow hunting for 6 years,
You've been doing
and 3D bow hunting.
3D bow hunting.
So bow hunting's illegal in Ireland, but it's like 3D targets. They're like fake animals, like a fake bedded deer, wild hog kind of thing. So
Wow.
I got to visit a lot of forests in Ireland. One of my favorite is like a really old forest in Mayo. And then there's ones up in Westmead. Good one. There's a few good ones down in Wexford. And there's a Dunbrody one. And that's a lovely course. But yeah, getting to see all these trees is great, but every now and then when you hear, oh, that archery club's gone now because the forest got cut down, it affects you directly because, okay, well, number one, we can't go shoot there anymore. Number two, okay, there's no more trees there. Okay, they can't exactly just plop them somewhere else. And like it's happened to my own place at the moment. I've been able to shoot in there for a while now as a result. So I have like a invested interest in this stuff anyway.
We've actually been talking about that recently, me and you, Jared, with
Yeah.
like newspapers.
What about them?
In our course, we're both doing media studies, and we talk a lot about like,
Oh yeah.
do we need newspapers anymore? Like, there's actual no need for physical copies.
Yeah. A
Like,
lot of in media studies we're talking about that a lot. Yeah. News being a kind of media. Like, should there ever be should we have anything printed out anymore? At the moment, the answer is kind of yes, because it's very difficult to tell someone's 70-year-old granny, here's the iPad, here's how it works, here's how you find your news. So for new people,
I don't know. Like, I think that if newspapers ceased to print tomorrow, we'd still have the same difficulties we have with forestry in Ireland. I think that the problems run. I think we should certainly have newspapers, but we should have far more than 2%, of which is maybe, I don't know, 2% of cover that we have at the moment. We certainly should have an awful lot more tree cover than that. Like, we should be much more invested in that for the benefit.
It's kind of disgraceful how bad we've let Ireland go. It's basically just green fields and a couple of big towns in the city. It is it's actually disgraceful.
I suppose I see Fergal Smith and the lads in my hill. I think Tallaght Bio maybe as well have a forestry arm, and there are people who are kind of saying, look, I'm not waiting for the grants. I'm not waiting for you to tell me I can grow an ash here, I can grow an oak here, or I can only grow a spruce here. I'm just going and I'm doing it. They're investing their time and their energy and their money in doing what needs to be done. And I think that's the great thing.
Good on them.
We can still do that. Like, we can still do just what needs to be done. We don't need to be steered through grants to do it. It's beneficial if the grants if they were much more aimed at, native broadleafs or whatever it is. But the conditions are as it is. If we're serious about it, I suppose we take up the case and we do what needs to be done.
Yeah, we do this thing on Twitter every now and then, where we say, like, for how many likes this post gets, we'll plant a certain amount of trees. At the moment, Thomas has to plant 10 out of plant 10. Or that we challenge a bunch of people to plant trees. We went with an apple tree. you know.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I enjoy doing that, but it's kind of disgraceful when I see like how little people actually did it. We nominated 30 people and one person did it.
Mm.
And
I,
these
I
are
think
people we talk to all the time. So it wasn't like I tagged Donald Trump to go plant a tree. It was
I,
someone I talked to on the daily.
I suppose to bring it right back around to the Irish, one of the workshops that we've done over the last couple of years, myself and Siobhan, is the roots of the Irish language, pun intended, is in Ogham, and the Ogham, the roots of the Ogham language are in the trees, and to bring the 13 trees, to give people their dates of birth and the tree that goes with them in that time. Like I'm January, so that will be the birch, and the characteristics of the birch and the type of soil that it grows in and its life cycle and things like that tell you a certain give away certain traits and characteristics about the tree, and you find when you read them that they may be things that you share in common with the birch yourself, you know. And that the language is rooted in the trees, I think, tells you an awful lot about the value of the language, and it tells you an awful lot about the importance of the trees to our psyche, our national psyche, if it thinks its way through Irish a little bit more in us, and the possibilities that are there for it. And that's been a glorious discovery. Like the apple tree, you planted the apple tree. A good one to start with. The apple tree is associated with abundance. I think maybe the end of August, September is its time, and that's the tree of abundance. So these things have, I suppose, an energetic sway that is it's a worthy level to deal with your life. I think a little bit difficult if it's not your tendency, but you can certainly come to it more and more by just asking simple, basic questions. You know.
Yeah. So I feel like we touched on everything else we said we talk about, unless there's anything you want to finish on.
No, I mean. Yeah, I don't know. It's always easy to respond to questions about things, I suppose, because sometimes you just need you need an invite. I find anyway. For other people, it's different. Other people just can talk straight without being asked anything. But I find that I need an invite to talk about something. So it's lovely to get to be asked, and I know then you send it out and maybe people listen to it and engage with it in some way, and if there's, I guess, ideas that people have or things they want to connect on or think there's something that can be done to get in touch with either Wild Irish Retreat or with me personally online, I'll happily engage with anybody who wants to, who sees possibilities, because there are plenty. That's the great thing. Like there's endless possibility, and creativity is certainly the response to the draconian measures that we're currently feeling from a government level. Like we have our creativity that's completely and utterly untouched, and we can still go out and use that, and we always have that possibility and that responsibility to use that. So that's it. I can dream the vision and bring people, as many people with you as they can, to help you realize it. And if I'm one of them, get in touch. But if I'm not one of them, find the people who are and get in touch with them, because we're all, anybody, you know, we're all waiting for the invite in a way as well. Like,
Now, even if you're a statesman or stateswoman, like most of our listeners are, I know most of you are like at least 4% Irish. If you're ever in Ireland, I reckon it's a good idea to give Diarmuid a visit, because fucking hell, it looks so cool. And look, you've heard the whole podcast. Like it's a great retreat, and it kind of gets you away from the stress of
life,
the way things are at the moment.
Yeah.
So we all need a wild Irish retreat. But
before we go, where can people find you if they want to, keep up with you?
Where can people find you on social media?
WildIrishRetreat.ie is the website for Wild Irish Retreat, and then I'm on far too many of the social media sites such as Instagram and Twitter and Facebook, and I think Diarmuid lyng will probably you shouldn't be too far away if you type that in, if you spell it somewhere right.
All right, so thanks everyone for listening. or watching. Make sure to like, comment, subscribe. Tell your grandma about the podcast. Take handy.
Love to.